Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello students, welcome to this lecture. In last lecture, we were discussing the electronic spectroscopy of diatomic molecules. We understood that in case of diatomic system, we have molecular orbitals which we can obtain by linear combination of atomic orbitals. And once we have the molecular orbitals of a diatomic molecule, or for that matter even for a polyatomic molecule, we can fill these orbitals with electrons with the way we filled electrons in the atomic orbitals of a many electron atom. When we were discussing the atomic spectroscopy, we saw that for a given electronic configuration, we can obtain many different terms and many different electronic states. Similarly, for diatomic molecules as well as for polyatomic molecules, when you have these molecular orbitals and we start filling electrons, for a particular way of filling this electron or for a particular electronic configuration, we can generate either one or many electronic states. We also know that when we have multiple electronic states, one of them will have the lowest low energy, and that would be the ground state. So, the ground state energy will be the electronic state. The ground state would be the electronic state where the molecule normally resides in. But starting from this configuration, we can also change electronic configuration by putting one electron transferring one electron from one orbital to another orbital. We did this exercise, for example, for helium atom, where we took one electron from 1s2 orbital of helium atom and put it in 2p or 3p, or and from there we took the 2p electron to 3s and 3d, and thereby we generated many electronic states, and this transition between one electronic state to another electronic state would show up in an electronic spectroscopy when we use UV or visible radiation for it. In case of molecules also, the similar argument holds, but here we do not have atomic orbitals, rather we have molecular orbitals. So, we can excite an electron from one molecular orbital to another molecular orbital and thereby generate many different electronic states. But unlike atomic cases, in our molecular cases there is an additional difference. The difference is that in case of molecule, now I have nuclear degrees of freedom. For example, imagine that I took one electron which was initially occupied in the so called bonding orbital and put that electron or excited that electron from a bonding orbital to an anti-bonding orbital. When the electron was in the bonding orbital, we know that it contributes more towards the bonding, therefore, it makes the bonds between the two atoms stronger, the bond distance is smaller in that case. But when we take out this electron from the bonding orbital and put it in an anti-bonding orbital, in that case the bond between the two atoms becomes weaker, the bond distance increases, the bond order decreases. So, therefore, we have a change in the nuclear environment. So, if I move my electron from a bonding orbital to anti-bonding orbital, I induce a nuclear change, or the change in the geometry of the molecule. So, therefore, the one electronic state where the electron was in the bonding orbital, it would have a different equilibrium geometry compared to the case where I have transferred this electron from bonding to anti-bonding orbital. I expect that in the second configuration the bond distance will be greater. So, therefore, in other words the nuclear geometry has changed. So, now electronic rearrangement is coupled with the molecular vibration. So, we will discuss that part of the story in today's class. We will restrict our discussion to diatomic molecules, but this discussion can be easily extended to polyatomic molecules. Only difference is that polyatomic systems have more than one degree of freedom. Now, how do we understand this effect, that when I carry out an electronic excitation or electronic change in the electronic configuration, how my nuclear geometries change? To do this, we take help of the so called potential energy diagrams. Potential energy diagrams, the one that you can see in the screen, this is potential energy diagram for C2 molecule, dicarbon molecule. This is a homonuclear diatomic system. How does one obtain this potential energy diagram? If you remember, when we wrote down the electronic Hamiltonian for an atom, or even for Hamiltonian for a molecule, we saw that the Hamiltonian had some electronic part, it also had some nuclear part. We then see that the nuclear, because of large mass difference, the nuclear can be considered frozen while we solve the electronic part of the problem. So, therefore, we invoked the so called Born-Oppenheimer approximation and separated the electronic Hamiltonian from the nuclear part. Now, when we solve this nuclear part of the Hamiltonian, or when we solve the corresponding Schrodinger equation, we obtain the energy which is now the electronic energy, but this electronic energy is obtained for a fixed value of nuclear arrangement. So, therefore, when I freeze the nuclear arrangement and then solve this energy that we call electronic energy, that is how I obtain the electronic energy. Now, you imagine that I keep changing the nuclear configuration. For example, if I have a diatomic system, only nuclear degree of freedom that I have is the bond distance. So, I continue to change my bond distance, let us say from 1 angstrom to 1.5 angstrom to 2 angstrom, and at each bond distance I froze the two nuclei and solved the electronic part of the problem. The solution from the electronic part of the problem will give me the electronic energy, and when I plot this electronic energy as a function of the nuclear distance, I get this potential energy diagram, or these are called potential energy curve. For a polyatomic molecule, if you have n number of atoms, you have 3 n minus 6 or 3 n minus 5 degrees of freedom. So, therefore, the potential energy surface can be very high dimensional. But for diatomic molecule, since you have only 1 degree of freedom, so therefore, the potential energy surface depends is essentially a potential energy curve which depends only on one dimension, that is the internuclear distance. So, in this plot we have in the x axis the internuclear distance, in this case carbon-carbon distance, and the y axis is what we are in y axis we are plotting the potential energy, or this is the electronic energy, the energy that I obtained from by solving the electronic part of the Hamiltonian. Now, there are a few features that you should look here. First of all, the potential energies are theoretical construct. You do not have an experimental technique to obtain this, but the potential energies provide a beautiful physical picture in our mind, because the nuclear movement or the nuclear motion can be imagined to occur on these potential energy curves. We will see how that comes about. One thing that you can notice here, the potential energies. So, the different curves correspond to different electronic states. You already know how to call this, how to identify this electronic state. For example, this is a singlet pi g state, this is a triplet sigma u state, this is a singlet pi u state, this is a triplet pi u state. So, you know triplet indicates the spin multiplicity, pi indicates here the lambda equals 1, and u indicates that it is a homonuclear diatomic. So, therefore, it has a center of inversion and it is of Ungerud asymmetry. So, we know how to identify these states or these electronic states. One thing that you should notice here is that all these electronic states resemble the potential that we used in case of vibrational spectroscopy, and particularly when we are discussing anharmonic potential, it resembles the Morse potential. You would say that at larger value of r, the curve flattens, and then we see that this would allow molecular dissociation. That is why we consider Morse potential. So, here consider any electronic state, you would see for large value of r, the energy does not change, because in that case what has happened is that the two atoms are now separated from each other. So, there is no further coupling between them. So, the molecule does not exist. So, therefore, the energy does not change. But one other thing that you should notice is that different electronic states give rise to different dissociation products. For example, when you consider this dissociation channel, you start from C2 molecule, but if you follow this dissociation channel, you would get one carbon in triplet p state, another carbon in triplet singlet sigma state. If you follow this dissociation channel, you would see that one carbon is triplet p, another both the carbons are in triplet p states. So, different electronic states will give rise to different dissociation products. That is another one important feature, and you can also see that different electronic states have different values of dissociation energy. That makes sense, because dissociation energy is actually the energy that you would provide to the system to carry out the dissociation. You imagine if the example that we had a few minutes ago, that if the electronic configuration has such that the electron is in a bonding orbital. So, to carry out the dissociation of this bond, I must provide greater energy, because this is a bonding, or the configuration has bonding electron, and therefore, the bond is strong, the bond length is small. So, therefore, the dissociation energy is more. But when you transfer this bonding electron to an anti-bonding orbital, the bond automatically becomes weaker. So, therefore, in that electronic state, the bond dissociation energy is smaller. So, therefore, the dissociation energy in different potential electronic states are different. The other thing that you would notice here, this concerns the spectroscopic notation of these electronic states, is that we understood this singlet pi u or triplet pi u, but you can see there are some x or a, b, all these notations. What are they? There are some convention. The convention is the following: the ground state of the molecule is noted with the symbol x, and sometimes it is also noted with a tilde sign on top. So, the ground state of this molecule is a singlet sigma g plus, and since it is the ground state, I call that as x singlet sigma g. Now, the ground state can either be we can have a particular spin multiplicity. In this case, it happens that the ground state is a singlet, but we know, for example, oxygen, the ground state is a triplet state. So, but consider this case. So, where ground state is singlet, in this when the ground state is singlet, all other higher electronic states of singlet multiplicities will be given as name A, B, C, D, and so on and so forth. So, now let us see, this is the equilibrium geometry, and when I go from go higher in energy, I see that the next state is a triplet state, but this does not have the same spin multiplicity. So, for all other different spin multiplicities, we give notation as a, small b, small c, small d. So, the first excited state is a triplet state. So, therefore, I write this as a pi u, triplet pi u, and I give this state an identity as a triplet pi u, where a is small case a. The next state I see is a triplet sigma g. So, since this is a triplet state and it has spin multiplicity different from the ground state, so therefore, I call this triplet sigma g minus, and this is b state. That means, the second excited state of different spin multiplicity compared to the ground state. Similarly, if you look for the small c case, you see that this is the small c case, this is small d case. Of course, the electronic energy of these states keep changing. So, we normally follow the equilibrium geometry of the ground state to call which one is c or which one is d. Now, come back to the singlet state. The first excited singlet state is here, which is a singlet pi u. So, this would go as name capital A singlet pi u. This simply says that this is the first excited state of the same spin multiplicity that the ground state belongs to, and the B I do not see the B state, singlet B is not shown here. Okay, singlet B is not shown here. So, this is your C state, which is a singlet pi G. So, this is how the spectroscopic convention is the ground state takes the name of takes the identity of x. If the state has the same spin multiplicity that of the ground state, then it takes a capital letter A, B, C, D. The first excited is A, second excited state is B, and so on and so forth. If the electronic state has a different spin multiplicity compared to the ground state, then it takes the name of small a, small b, small c, and so on and so forth. So, this is the spectroscopic notation of the electronic states. Now, to go from one electronic state to another electronic state, we of course have discussed about the selection rules. We know that to carry out this kind of electronic transition, we see that the energy that we require goes in a few electron volts. For example, if I go in this side of the y axis, the energy is plotted in electron volts. So, you can see we can go 0, 1, 2, 3. So, the energy difference often comes in the range of electron volt. So, looking at the electromagnetic radiation and the corresponding energy, we know that this kind of energy can be provided by UV or visible, ultraviolet or visible part of the electromagnetic radiation. So, therefore, when you carry out electronic spectroscopy, we do we use UV visible radiation. If you recall, to do infrared vibrational spectroscopy, we needed infrared radiation, because that radiation had just about enough energy to vibrate the molecule. But infrared radiation, while it was able to vibrate the molecule, it also could rotate the molecule simultaneously, or it could also change the rotational levels of the molecule, because rotational energies rotational levels are separated by a very small amount of energy, which can be done even by microwave radiation. Microwave radiation can only cause rotation, it cannot cause vibration or electronic rearrangement. Infrared radiation can only cause molecular vibration. It can of course infrared radiation can cause molecular vibration as well as rotation, but it cannot cause electronic rearrangement. For typical electronic rearrangement or electronic spectroscopy, we use UV visible light, but UV visible light, while it changes the electronic state, it has enough energy even to vibrate the molecule or to change the vibrational state of the molecule. So, therefore, when we are talking about the vibrational spectroscopy, we introduce raw vibrational spectroscopy, because the states had both excitation in the vibrational level as well as rotational level. In the similar way, when we are discussing electronic spectroscopy, we can simultaneously excite the molecule to a high excited vibrational level, even to an excited rotational level. So, the combined spectroscopy is called raw vibronic spectroscopy, that rotational vibrational electronic spectroscopy or raw vibronic spectroscopy, but that requires extremely high resolution. What we will do, what we will consider in our current discussion is we will ignore the rotational structure, but consider the vibronic spectroscopy. That means, when electronic transition occurs, simultaneously vibrational states also get altered. So, the transitions are called the vibronic transition. When we have this vibronic transition, so of course, we start from the ground vibrational level, that is where when you take the sample, the molecule exists in its ground vibrational level at room temperature, and then when you irradiate this molecule with UV or visible radiation, the molecule undergoes electronic rearrangement. But now there is an issue. When the electron undergoes this transition, the electrons are much lighter compared to the nuclei. So, when the electrons undergo this transition, during this time, the nuclei are too heavy to move, because this electronic transition happens very fast. So, therefore, before quantum mechanics was properly formulated, Frank had some observations about these vibronic transitions, and he postulated that the nuclei have the same position before and after the transition. So, that means, when the electronic transition is happening, nuclei, they do not change their position. Not only that, he also said that the nuclei also do not change their velocity before and after transition. What it indicates? Let us discuss that. So, here we show a transition from a ground electronic state to an excited electronic state. So, Frank's condition was that during this transition, the nuclei this should be in the same position, or they should not change their position. In this potential energy diagram, you know that in the x axis we are plotting internuclear distance. So, if the nuclei are not going to change their place, so that means during this transition I can show this transition by simply drawing a vertical line, because if I go deviate from the vertical line, that would indicate the different values of r, because my x axis has internuclear distance. To keep the internuclear distance same during the transition, so I go from this point shown here A to this point shown as B. So, this is the transition. Since the condition that the position should remain unchanged, so this gives rise to a vertical line in our potential energy diagram. So, therefore, this kind of transitions are also called as vertical transition. Now, this is nuclei have same position, but he also said that nuclei should also have the same velocity before and after transition. What happens to what was the velocity before transition? Of course, the before transition the sample was in its vibrational ground state. So, it was a stationary vibrational state. So, the nuclei were stationary. So, when it goes to the upper excited state, then also the molecule the velocity of the nuclei should remain same, that means they also should remain stationary. Now, when I go to the upper excited state, you see I hit one point at I hit the upper excited state at a point called shown B, I also hit the upper excited state at a point called D. Now, there is a difference between point B and D. You see the point B lies on the boundary of the upper potential energy. What is so special about the boundary? We know that in classical description, in classical harmonic oscillator, the boundary points, so the terminal points are also called the turning points. They are classical turning points. These are the place where these are the points where the simple harmonic motion simply reverses its path. So, if it oscillates at a classical turning point, it starts to oscillate in the opposite direction that it was previously doing. So, at this classical turning point, momentarily the nuclei become stationary. So, therefore, to begin with our nuclei were stationary, and only at this boundary region or only at this classical turning point region the nuclei become momentarily stationary. So, therefore, B the transition will happen from A to B, but it will not happen from A to D. Why? Because at D the nuclei are not stationary, they are showing some motion. So, therefore, A to D would not be allowed. What about the other possible configuration where the nuclei are stationary? Of course, in the electronic excited state, if I come down to the bottom of this potential at which is shown as C, there also the nuclei are stationary, but the transition will not happen from A to C, because that will violate the first condition that he proposed, that it should have the same position before and after transition, and in this case the transition this A to C is not allowed, A to D is also not allowed. But this was the classical argument that Frank proposed. Note one thing here from here we are starting from the bottom of the potential, while we know that there is in quantum mechanical description there exists a 0 point energy where the molecules live. So, this is the classical argument that was proposed by Frank, but we can also discuss the same thing in a quantum mechanical language where most of the points remain valid. This is what we would do next. This procedure is known as the Frank-Condon principle, due to the original work original postulate of Frank. In this quantum mechanical description, we start from the ground vibrational state. So, we see that this is the ground electronic state, this is x given as x, this is the excited electronic state shown as A, the spectroscopic notation. So, suppose let us call this electronic state epsilon. So, now this electronic state, the ground electronic state, has several vibrational levels. So, let us define these vibrational levels as V and call the vibronic state. So, this is a vibronic state, because this state has an electronic identity as well as a vibrational identity. So, this ground state is psi epsilon 0, because it is its vibrational level is 0, it is in the vibrational ground state. Now, during the electronic transition, the nuclei do not get sufficient time to adjust themselves. So, therefore, the transition is vertical, but now I see that when I make this transition, I go to the upper excited state and I hit one vibrational level here. The classical picture would have said that 0 to 4 transition, because here you see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4th vibrational level. So, 0 to 4 transition is only allowed, other transitions are not allowed, from because in other cases the nuclei are not actually in stationary. But quantum mechanics suggests a different way, because what we see is that we, for every vibronic level, we have the corresponding vibronic wave function. We then see what, when we start from an initial state to the final state, whether this transition is allowed or not, we know how to obtain this. We can simply write down the electric dipole transition moment integral and then see what is the value of this dipole transition moment. Let us call this upper excited electronic state sigma prime and its vibrational level as V prime. So, therefore, I have this psi E prime V prime, or equivalently I give this notation E prime V epsilon prime V prime, or this state I call it epsilon and V. So, I am going from epsilon V to epsilon prime V prime, and who would do this transition? Of course, I need the electric dipole moment. Now, in case of a single atom, electric dipole moment was coming because only from the electron, but now in case of a molecule, now I have many electrons, but I also have many nuclei. So, the nuclear charge distribution can also contribute to the dipole moment. So, therefore, to write down the dipole transition moment integral, this is my initial state sigma epsilon V, and this is my final state epsilon prime V prime, and the dipole moment, electric dipole moment is mu. But I know this mu is mu E plus mu n, because there is a contribution from electronic part, there is also a contribution from nuclear part. Now, this vibronic state that we I have defined here epsilon V can be written down in this format. You have already seen this notation here, which says that this is the nuclear part of the wave function, which has explicit dependence on the nuclear coordinate capital R. The electronic part of the solution, we have obtained this wave function from by solving the electronic part of the Hamiltonian within Born-Oppenheimer approximation. So, therefore, this electronic wave function has explicit dependence on the electronic coordinate, while it has got a parametric dependence on the nuclear coordinate. By parametric dependence, I mean that if you change the nuclear environment or nuclear arrangement, this wave function is going to change. So, this wave function is valid for a given parameter of capital R or the nuclear arrangement. Similarly, I have this final state, which is psi epsilon prime and V prime, and I have two operators here, mu E and mu n from electron and nuclear, and I am integrating this over all electronic and all nuclear coordinates. Now, I do this rearrangement. First, I consider the mu E. So, I consider the electronic part of the terms. So, I have, when I take them, I see that the electronic state, electronic part of the electronic terms can be written down, and we can do this electronic integration over electronic coordinates separately. And the second term over here considers the mu n. The first term considered mu E, the second term considered mu n. Now, since electronic part of the solution is obtained for a fixed value of R, so therefore, I am able to write the electronic part of the integration corresponding to the electronic part within the nuclear part. Now, let us look at the second term over here, which is simply an overlap between one electronic state with another electronic state. If you remember, I got these electronic states by solving the electronic part of the Hamiltonian. Since that electronic Hamiltonian was a Hermitian operator, so therefore, these eigenfunctions are orthogonal. So, therefore, their overlap is going to be 0. So, therefore, the second term is not going to contribute. Now, let us consider the first term. When I look at this first term, I see the electronic part of the integration suggests that this is an electronic, the dipole moment, transition dipole moment from epsilon electronic state to epsilon prime. So, from x state to a state, what is the matrix element of the corresponding electronic electric dipole moment. So, for most of the cases we can consider the coupling between two electronic state, the dipole moment matrix element between two given electronic state, we can consider that as a constant. We call this mu as mu epsilon epsilon prime. So, for a given pair of electronic states, this is a constant. So, we can bring out this term, which is of course an approximation, because this dipole moment is going to change with r, but this change is can be ignored. So, in case we when we do that, we obtain this relation, we bring out this mu epsilon epsilon prime outside, and then we have this term over here. What do I see here? I see that the integration is only over the nuclear coordinate, and this is simply an overlap between two vibrational function. So, I can rewrite this vibrational function like this. I see this is a constant for a pair of electronic state, and this integral is called a Franck-Condon overlap. As given here. Now, in this lecture we discussed about this vibronic transition and how what are the selection rules for this vibronic transition. So, we have discussed up to this Franck-Condon, this is overlap, forgive me. We have written down this Franck-Condon overlap, and we will continue our discussion in the next class from here. Thank you for your attention.